Donald Trump's latest comments about the escalating conflict with Iran are creating serious debate across Washington, the military community, and even within his own political coalition, as the United States moves deeper into a rapidly evolving confrontation in the Middle East. Questions are being raised about strategy, leadership, and the long-term consequences of the decisions now being made in the White House. Speaking publicly about the situation, Donald Trump acknowledged that the outcome of the operation in Iran remains uncertain. When asked about the worst-case scenario, Trump suggested that even after removing top leadership figures, there is no guarantee that the situation will improve. According to Trump, one of the major risks is that the current leadership could simply be replaced by individuals who are just as hardline or even more aggressive than those who have already been eliminated. He admitted that many of the individuals previously identified by U.S. intelligence as key targets are now dead, and that additional figures who might have been part of succession planning could also have been killed based on early battlefield reports. Those comments come as analysts warn that eliminating senior leaders rarely brings the kind of political transformation that military planners might hope for. Veterans of earlier conflicts say the strategy has been attempted before. One former general recalled the experience of the Iraq War, when the U.S. military famously circulated decks of playing cards with the faces of top enemy leaders. Each card represented a target, from the ace of spades down to lower-ranking commanders, and every night U.S. forces attempted to capture or eliminate them. Yet despite those operations, the overall impact on insurgent networks was often minimal. Whenever one leader was removed, another quickly stepped forward to take their place. According to military experts, organizations like Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps are structured precisely to survive leadership losses. Succession planning is built into the system, ensuring that new commanders can assume control almost immediately. That is why some analysts believe the current strategy may underestimate the resilience of Iran's power structure. Iran's leadership has long anticipated the possibility of targeted strikes against senior officials. Former intelligence officials note that succession plans have existed for years, particularly because of the advanced age and health concerns surrounding senior leaders. Even before the current conflict escalated, Iranian leadership circles had reportedly developed multiple layers of succession planning. Some reports suggested as many as 4 levels of potential successors had been identified. If accurate, that would mean that removing the top layer of leadership would not fundamentally disrupt the system governing the country. Meanwhile, inside the United States, debate is intensifying about how the conflict began and what strategic goals the administration is pursuing. Some critics argue that the military itself has performed exceptionally well, executing complex operations with precision and professionalism. Many in Washington acknowledge the competence and discipline of American forces, but critics of the administration claim that President Trump is using the success of the military to strengthen his own political image. According to those critics, the president has turned military operations into a demonstration of personal strength, portraying himself as a decisive wartime leader. The concern among some analysts is that the United States could become deeply entangled in a prolonged regional conflict. Early in the operation, the administration described the strikes as targeted and limited. However, only 4 days into the conflict, the scope of the confrontation already appears to be expanding. One of the most controversial developments involves Trump's announcement that the U.S. Navy may take a leading role in escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. The narrow waterway is one of the most strategically important shipping routes in the world, carrying a significant portion of global oil supplies. However, sending naval forces into the Persian Gulf carries significant risks. The Strait of Hormuz is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, making it highly vulnerable to military confrontation. Naval experts warn that Iranian forces have spent decades preparing defensive strategies for precisely this scenario. Those strategies include sea mines, fast attack boats, coastal missile batteries, and drone surveillance systems. Even if parts of Iran's navy have been weakened by recent strikes, the remaining capabilities could still pose serious threats to American ships operating in the confined waters of the Gulf. Military planners know that a single mine or missile strike could have enormous consequences, both militarily and economically. Disruption of oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz could send global energy prices soaring and destabilize financial markets worldwide. At the same time, political tensions are growing within Trump's own political movement. Some influential voices within conservative media are openly questioning the administration's reasoning for entering the conflict. A tweet from conservative commentator Matt Walsh quickly went viral after he criticized the administration's explanation for the war. Walsh argued that if the United States was entering the conflict primarily because of Israeli actions against Iran, it could create serious divisions within the America First political movement. That criticism highlights a growing fault line inside the broader MAGA coalition. For years, the movement has included both strong pro-Israel supporters and a rising faction of nationalist isolationists who argue that the United States should avoid foreign wars altogether. This divide has been visible before, particularly during online disputes between conservative influencers and political organizations. Figures associated with the so-called Groypers movement have repeatedly criticized what they see as excessive foreign influence on US policy. For them, the question is not only about Iran, but about the broader principle of American sovereignty in foreign policy decisions. They argue that US military power should never be used primarily to advance the strategic goals of another country. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's statements have intensified that debate. Rubio suggested that the United States moved toward confrontation with Iran partly because Israel was already preparing its own military action. According to Rubio, once it became clear that Israel intended to strike Iran, the United States faced pressure to respond to potential Iranian retaliation. That explanation has sparked strong reactions from multiple sides of the political spectrum. Critics argue that if the United States entered the conflict primarily because of Israeli actions, it raises serious questions about American decision-making independence. Supporters of the administration counter that the US and Israel share strategic interests in preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons and expanding its regional influence. From their perspective, cooperation between the two countries is both natural and necessary. Investigative reporting has also shed light on the diplomatic background leading up to the conflict. According to one report, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago late in December. During that meeting, Netanyahu reportedly warned that Israel might need to launch military strikes against Iran sometime during the first half of 2026. Israeli officials had long argued that Iran's nuclear program represented an existential threat to Israel's security. Netanyahu has repeatedly warned that diplomatic negotiations alone would not be sufficient to stop Iran from eventually acquiring nuclear weapons capability. Over the following weeks, according to sources familiar with the discussions, Israeli officials continued pressing the United States to support a potential military operation. At the same time, the Trump administration was debating several possible strategies. Some advisors reportedly favored diplomatic pressure combined with economic sanctions. Others believed that military action might be necessary to destroy key components of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Ultimately, the United States and Israel launched what appears to be a coordinated military operation targeting Iranian facilities. The scale and scope of the strikes have not been fully disclosed, but early reports suggest that multiple targets across Iran were hit simultaneously. Another factor that may have influenced Trump's decision was the earlier US operation in Venezuela earlier in the year. That operation reportedly unfolded quickly and achieved its objectives with minimal resistance. Some analysts believe the apparent success of that campaign may have increased confidence within the administration about the effectiveness of rapid military interventions. However, experts warn that Iran presents a far more complex challenge than Venezuela. Iran has a large, experienced military, powerful regional allies, and extensive missile capabilities. Any prolonged conflict could draw in other countries across the Middle East. For now, the situation remains highly volatile. Military operations continue, diplomatic channels remain tense, and political debate inside the United States is intensifying. As the conflict enters its next phase, the key question facing policymakers is whether the current strategy will achieve its goals, or whether it risks triggering a broader regional war that could reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East for years to come.